For as long as I can remember, Family Guy has been one of my comfort shows. You know, one of those shows I can just throw on, and no matter if I'm truly paying attention or not, I can always resonate with the world and the characters, no matter how shitty some of them are as people. The show can also be pretty outlandish and obscene on occasion, and eventually I would love to go over the series in its entirety, but I'll have to wait until the series concludes, and as of today, that doesn't look to be happening for quite a while. In the meantime, I'd like to cover one of Family Guy's miniseries, the Road 2 series of episodes that star Brian and Stewie Griffin on the road to insert destination. In total, over 432 total episodes of Family Guy have been released at the time of this video being written, and of those 432 episodes, 8 of them are Road 2 specials. Some of those episodes are arguably some of the best of the series, while others are not quite. Nonetheless, the series of episodes helped create one of the most important dynamics in the entire show, in the friendship between the talking liberal alcoholic dog and genius somewhat evil gay 1-year-old baby. Doesn't that sound kinda weird? Well, it is what it is. I love Family Guy, and these Road 2 episodes have always held a special place in my heart, and it's a big reason why I found the series in the first place, which I'll talk more in depth about later. In this video, I'll be going over each of the Road 2 episodes, explaining my opinions, and then ranking them at the very end. These are my opinions, so please respect that. I would love to hear your opinions though, so feel free to comment. On that note, please like and subscribe too. Any support is greatly appreciated. Anyways, as a disclaimer, I will be revealing details about the plot for each of these episodes, so if you haven't seen these still, then this is not for you. Go watch all 8 episodes first. Oh wait, go. Pause right now. Alright? Seen them? Isn't the India episode ass? Alright, this is a Family Guy Road 2 ranking and retrospective. Family Guy was created by the Orville creator Seth MacFarlane, and the series was conceived after MacFarlane developed 2 animated films called The Life of Larry and Larry and Steve, which starred early versions of both Peter and Brian, with a lot of the same humor the show would eventually have. The animations would garner attention, and MacFarlane getting the opportunity to pitch a 15-minute pilot, which was lost media until really recently, fun fact, was greenlit in May of 1998. The series would finally premiere after the conclusion of Super Bowl 33, allowing the show to have 22.01 million viewers, a staggering amount. And the show was popular and had steady viewership to start out, but would slowly lose steam over the next 2 seasons, Fox ultimately pulling the plug on the show in 2002. But after mass DVD sales and popularity with reruns on Adult Swim, Fox would revive Family Guy for a 4th season in 2004, and the series eventually premiering again in May of 2005, and has continued to air since, currently on its 23rd season. As the show has gone on, it has noticeably decreased in story quality and humor, having gems here and there, even now, but even so, I love them all. The show is so stupid, but it's great. And Family Guy loves pop culture references, having some in nearly every single cutaway, which, if you didn't know, happens almost every 25 seconds. Of these references, the Road 2 series might be among the most prominent, and the original Road 2 series was a live-action string of films from the 1940s through 60s, starring both Bob Hope and Bing Crosby. In total, the duo starred in 7 films together, along with Dorothy Lamour, until 1962. Each of the films followed Hope and Crosby as wisecracking, fast-talking conmen who would somehow find themselves in exotic locations while typically pursued by trouble, while also competing for Lamour's affections. Thanks to the duo's quick wit, and well, luck, the both of them would always manage to survive their hijinks. And despite their constant bickering, betrayals, and attempts to outdo one another, their friendship ends up staying intact by the end, at least until the next adventure. The films were immensely popular and left a lasting impact on pop culture and overall film landscape forever. Being that Family Guy was a pop culture reference addict, it seemed like the perfect type of plot to combine 2 of their main characters that hadn't really shared a dynamic besides some small moments at that point. Stewie and Brian shared a similar love-hate dynamic that Bing and Crosby also had, and Family Guy would air their first Road 2 episode in the 2nd season, 13th episode titled Road to Rhode Island, on May 30th, 2000. The most recent episode in the miniseries being Road to India, which would air in Family Guy's 14th season, 20th episode on May 22nd, 2016. Wow, It's been 9 years since our last Family Guy Road to episode. Damn, Family Guy, get on it. Alrighty, time to rate these suckers. Season 2, Episode 13, Road to Rhode Island, would release on May 30th, 2000, nearly 25 years ago. Holy shit, we're getting old. Directed by the future co-creator of Phineas and Ferb, Dan Povenmire, it seemed we were in store for a banger, and boy were we. We start out with these unique title cards instead of the typical theme song, a choice that I personally love and would be used in future Road 2 episodes. And after the conclusion of the title cards, we are brought 7 years into the past, somewhere in Austin, Texas, at a puppy mill, where we're introduced to a litter of pups, including a baby version of Brian, which is quite cute. And hilariously though, Brian has the same ass voice he always does.
Hey, does anyone here have thumbs? Anyone? No?
It becomes clear quite quickly that Brian is the only conscious and only one that has the ability to speak compared to the other dogs, including his mother. And I always found this interesting that Brian seems to be one of only a couple dogs in the entire Family Guy universe that has the ability to speak, but no one ever seems to bat an eye about this. This is probably just a case of me taking Family Guy too seriously. Anyhow, it's revealed that Brian was taken away from the rest of the litter, separating himself from his mother, and then we arrive back into the present. Brian is revealed to be telling all of this to a therapist. The therapist recommends Brian should face his mother about abandoning him, as well as calling him out for his drinking. And man, I miss when Brian was a real person, or real dog person I guess. He used to be the voice of reason, and was grounded. Though he was an alcoholic, he almost always had good intentions and cared about the well-being of those closest to him. Not to say all of those qualities don't exist in any form in modern Brian, but they're pretty much two different characters. This version of early Brian I enjoy is prominent in this episode, offering to pick Stewie up from Babs and Carter's in Palm Springs, not only to get out of town and clear his mind for a moment, but to allow Peter and Lois to have a few days together, Lois wanting them to work on their marriage. This will be our subplot. Brian arrives to pick Stewie up, to Stewie's displeasure. It's so interesting to look back at these two's dynamic early on, seeming to have underlying beef. But again, this is their first truly prominent episode together, so it would take some time for their relationship to become more loving as the series progresses. For now though, the two of them are earlier in their dynamic, waiting in the airport for their flight back to Rhode Island, only they never board. Brian, in typical fashion, gets drunk at the airport bar and leaves Stewie in charge of their bags. Stewie comes to find Brian only for their bags to be stolen by the time they arrive back at their gate. This forces Brian to tell Lois that they traded their plane tickets for train tickets and will be a few more days. The dog and the baby stay the night at a seedy motel where Stewie practically gets a man murdered for some beauty rest in honestly one of the best moments in the entire series. They awake with a call exclaiming that their card was declined and would have to face repercussions if they can't pay. Brian and Stewie decide to flee, stealing a car out of the motel's parking lot, and they eventually attempt to pose as crop duster pilots, Brian dressed as Snoopy, and I love when they do this. Brian and Stewie are not crop dusters though, crashing instantly. They then hitchhike with various Mexican immigrants through Texas, creating one of the funniest interactions in the entire series.
Oh, you speak English?
No, just that first speech and this one explaining it.
You're kidding, right?
Okay.
While hitchhiking, they come across a sign indicating they're 8 miles outside of Austin, Texas. Brian realizes this might be his chance to listen to his therapist and confront his mother. Stewie and Brian then arrive at the puppy mill after an 8-mile walk, and they come face to face with the mill's owner and wife, who are pretty funny off the bat, taking a moment to realize who Brian is, even though he's the only dog that has ever been able to speak on that mill. The farmer reveals to Brian that his mother, Biscuit, died the year prior, and is revealed to us that she's been taxidermied and turned into a table. Brian is expectedly traumatized. I mean, just imagine. Brian convinces a reluctant Stewie to help him steal his mom from the mill. They leave and ultimately give Biscuit a proper burial in a somber yet humorous moment. And after this, the two make their way to a boxcar, presumably on the way to Rhode Island. The two reflect on their journey, breaking into a musical number. The song Road to Rhode Island is probably my favorite part of this episode. Not only is the song catchy, which is quite unsurprising due to the aforementioned creator of Phineas and Ferb, Dan Povenmire, directing. Phineas and Ferb are known to have banger musical numbers practically every episode, by the way, if you didn't know. The setting of the boxcar at night only adds to the ambiance, being both aesthetically pleasing but relaxing on our protagonist's final stretch home. I should also note that the vocals bang. It's crazy how Seth MacFarlane can have a duet with himself and sound awesome. I mean, I guess it's not that surprising knowing Seth's vocal chops. Anyhow, Stewie and Brian then return home, their journey over, but a new connection's formed, ending the episode. I guess I should backtrack and talk a bit about Peter and Lois' side plot. While Brian is away getting Stewie, Lois convinces Peter to watch a couple's counseling video, only they turn out to be lewd tapes, convincing Peter to buy more of them. Lois eventually catches on, but instead of reacting with anger, she instead dives into the tape's position, to Peter's initial shock in a hilarious moment, ultimately ending on a high note for their relationship. And overall, I actually like this side plot. It's quite funny and not at all overbearing, taking necessary time from Stewie and Brian's plot. It's not super in-depth, and marriage crisis plots are pretty common between Peter and Lois, but frankly this one is quite sweet, and actually has a pretty nice conclusion. I also want to shout out Chris for yelling, "Get out of my head! Get out of my head!" as the last line of this episode. My old roommate and I could not stop quoting it, so thanks for that, Road to Rhode Island. Obviously, this episode is at the tops of the rankings so far, being it's the first Road 2 episode, but I doubt it'll move too far, if at all. It's one of Family Guy's greatest and most classic episodes. Though it's not the most thrilling plot, the dynamic between Brian and Stewie keeps things entertaining, each of them getting into deeper issues before inevitably crossing paths with Brian's past, and a melancholic though humorous look back at where he started and where he is now. He has a good life, and overall a very beautiful and wholesome episode of Family Guy, and I miss these versions of these characters. And don't get me wrong, I still love them today, but the early versions of Stewie and Brian are so peak, especially Brian. I actually do enjoy a lot of Stewie's development as the series progresses, but I can't really say the same for Brian. Again, a great episode and one of Family Guy's best, atop the list. On to the next. Season 3, Episode 20, Road to Europe, was released on February 7, 2002. This episode is once again directed by Dan Povenmire, so again we're in store for quite a banger. We're also once again introduced to the goated title cards, and I really like these ones. The episode starts out with Stewie being completely captivated by a children's program from Britain called Jolly Farm, which is evidently a loose parody on the Teletubbies. And I just love when Stewie actually acts like a baby. It's a fun and interesting counterbalance between his genius and infancy that makes his character universally loved and intriguing. Brian gives Stewie shit for liking a baby show, which Stewie responds by kicking him in the leg. Stewie and Brian's relationship has evidently progressed since the last Road 2 episode, though obviously they still have beef. Anyways, comparing his real life to the world of Jolly Farm, Stewie starts to become resentful of his reality and becomes determined to go and live on Jolly Farm. While this is happening, Peter and Lois are preparing to go to Kisstock, a marathon series of concerts for the band Kiss, if that wasn't made clear. Again, this will be our side plot. While they're gone, they ask Brian to watch Stewie, and he agrees, thinking it'll be a breeze. Of course, it will not. Without anyone knowing, Stewie sneaks into a plane bound for London. Brian discovers this through a hilarious long note that Stewie leaves, which, why does Brian read it all? Anyway, he discovers the plan nearly too late, but he finds a way to get on board of Stewie's plane to stop him, only for both of them to end up in Saudi Arabia due to Stewie's poor navigation. Right away, Stewie and Brian bust out into a musical number that, again, bangs, giving them a camel. And I really like their banter in this musical number. I do prefer Road to Rhode Island if I'm being completely honest, but I do still really love You and I Are So Awfully Different. They travel through the desert with the camel, but it eventually collapses from exhaustion. The duo have to figure out what to do quickly, and somehow hilariously find a comfort in. I want to note, I really like Stewie and Brian's dynamic in this episode. They're still early on in their relationship, but their banter and overall connection is starting to become what we all know and love. Other than Peter, these two carry Family Guy, by the way. The duo decides to steal a hot air balloon. The dog and the baby really do travel through Europe in a joke that shows the world in a globe form, which I think is gold. The duo drifts into Vatican City, easily offending the Pope when they travel through Switzerland, Munich, before getting high in Amsterdam Cafe. They eventually reach the BBC studio in London. Stewie is quickly devastated to learn that Jolly Farms is just a TV set, with actors and no magical farm life in a pretty hilarious sequence. Brian helps Stewie come to terms with this revelation, and I honestly really love how much Brian really does care about Stewie, and it's actually quite sweet. Stewie comes to terms with this outcome and ultimately decides to start collecting funky fruit hats as his new obsession, replacing Jolly Farms. This ends Brian and Stewie's arc. Let's hop back into the side plot. Lois and Peter in full face paint and leather outfits go to Kiss and at one of the concerts, Lois embarrassingly fumbles a sing-along during Rock and Roll All Night, exposing that she's not actually a Kiss fan, which she was acting like until then. Before we keep going, I just find it interesting that Kiss was a pretty popular guest star in various animated series, but I guess they translate well to animation, so what do I know. Anyways, Peter becomes humiliated by Lois deciding to leave the concert and punish himself with a stop at Denny's. With a stroke of luck, Peter and Lois happen to run into Kiss, with their makeup off, I should note. With their makeup removed, Lois realizes she dated Gene Simmons at one time, and Gene hilariously introduces the band to Lois by calling her Loose Lois.
Loose Lois.
Cool, Loose Lois.
A legend herself.
My grand slam was supposed to be with sausage.
That's out of pocket. This connection restores Peter's faith in Lois, ending the episode by bragging on public access about how his wife once slept with Kiss. Ah, classic Family Guy. I actually really like this subplot in comparison to Road to Rhode Island's. It just feels like there's more going on, but maybe because Brian and Stewie's plot is not as fleshed out as much as I think it could have. Overall, honestly, I'm not sure it passes Road to Rhode Island, but it's so close. The musical number, though quite different from Road to Rhode Island's, still bangs and is one of the best parts of the episode. And I like Peter and Lois' subplot, but I do honestly prefer the ending in Road to Rhode Island, though this ending is pretty funny. The journey was also not as emotional, the duo going to Jolly Farm compared to the entirety of America and facing Brian's past. This is easily one of Family Guy's best episodes, but honestly I prefer Road to Rhode Island by a small margin. Alright, on to Road to Rupert. Season 5, Episode 9, Road to Rupert, was released on January 28th, 2007. And I actually thought the next Road 2 episode would be Road to the Multiverse, completely forgetting this was a Road 2 episode. Sorry. Knowing Dan Povenmire directed the first 3 Road 2 episodes, I didn't think he'd end off here, but oh yeah. This is also directed by Dan Povenmire, so again, this is probably going to be a banger. As always, the title cards return, though they're not my favorite of the bunch. This episode begins with the Griffin family holding a yard sale. While distracted, Brian accidentally sells Stewie's stuffed bear, Rupert. Stewie returns, questioning Rupert's sudden disappearance, and Brian quickly realizes his mistake and eventually confesses to Stewie what happened. Stewie reacts accordingly. Before Stewie is confessed to, though, I really enjoyed the sequence of Rupert's funeral, a reference to Star Trek. It's surprisingly emotional and shows how much Stewie loves Rupert, and how much he needs him. So once he finds out what Brian has done, he immediately springs into action. Brian, who is trying to get Stewie to get a replacement for Rupert, doesn't understand Stewie's relationship with the bear, which I don't even know what their relationship is. I will not be exploring that anytime soon. So let's move on. While at the yard sale, Peter in a hilarious moment buys his own Evel Knievel gloves and begins to do tricks with his car, and of course, in typical Peter fashion, causes an accident. Joe arrives later to revoke Peter's driver's license. This leads to Meg becoming Peter's chauffeur. Say it with me now. This is our subplot. Stewie and Brian then begin to analyze the DNA on the dollar that purchased Rupert, finding that a man named Stanford bought the bear. They find that he lives close by, so they set out to find him. They arrive at his address, but it's deserted, and they notice a moving truck, barely missing it. Before it gets too far though, Stewie and Brian stop a car which just happens to be driven by Mayor Adam West. West agrees to help them chase the truck, only until they reach the border of Connecticut, where West explains that he cannot go into Connecticut. With a stroke of luck though, a box falls from the truck just as Stewie and Brian are dropped off. They learn that Stanford has moved to Aspen, Colorado. Colorado, my home state. I think it's really cool that this is pretty much Road to Colorado alongside Rupert. I don't know, I just think it's goated. After an argument that breaks the fourth wall, the duo hitchhikes their way to Colorado, and when they arrive they attempt to rent a helicopter but can't afford it, initially, before they're told they can do a song and dance as payment. Cue our musical number. Now, this musical number is quite different from the other Road 2 numbers. Stewie is a dance sequence with actor Gene Kelly, replacing our previously animated Jerry the Mouse, who was the original character dancing with Gene Kelly. And honestly, it's actually one of my favorite and most memorable moments in the entire series. It obviously took so much work for that sequence to come into existence, animating Stewie the way they did. They went all out. Brian and Stewie end up with the helicopter, and while Stewie practices his crashing reaction in the passenger seat, they eventually actually do crash into the snowy Colorado mountains, helicopter sliding down an exhilarating sequence that is made funnier by Stewie randomly becoming Satan. Like, why? They both do survive the crash and hike all the way to Aspen. They find Stanford has given Rupert to his son and isn't willing to give him back. Stewie challenges Stanford to a ski race for the rights to Rupert, and if he loses, Stanford gets the rights to Brian. And yeah, this is definitely how some beef is settled in Colorado. Brian questions this, Stanford being a champion skier, but Stewie has something up his sleeve. Cheating. Stewie uses rocket skis to speed past Stanford, sitting in his own little room with a butler, relaxing while the skis do the work. Stewie does eventually check on his progress, but crashes almost instantaneously afterward, allowing Stanford to win. This means Brian has to go with Stanford and his family. Stewie and Brian confess that they can't keep their end of the deal, Stewie having his butler splash boiling hot tea into the eyes of Stanford's son, stealing Rupert back. The duo then carjack a man in one of my favorite moments in the whole series, ending the episode with the duo driving back to Rhode Island, them reflecting on the carjacking that just occurred, ending the episode. Well, okay, we gotta backtrack. As I previously mentioned, Peter lost his license, thus Meg becomes his chauffeur over a fancy-looking monkey to Peter's dismay. Meg begins to drive Peter around, and I love the SpongeBob reference because at one point that was literally me, and eventually starts to drive his friends around as well. I love Peter and the guys. They just constantly cause chaos, especially while drunk in the back of the car while Meg drives them around. I'll have to rank the guys episodes at some point. That's a good idea. Hold on, I'm gonna write that down. Anyhow, Meg cannot take the torment anymore, eventually snapping and beating the shit out of another driver in a fit of road rage. And Peter is really impressed by this. They then have a father-daughter montage of them driving around, having a good time together, and I always enjoy when they get Peter and Meg to get along and bond. It's pretty rare due to Peter's abuse and always sweet. Joe arrives at their house at the end of the montage, giving Peter his license back, ending Meg's arc as Peter's chauffeur. This saddens Meg, thinking her father will go back to abusing her, which he says he will, but only to keep up appearances with the rest of the family, even though he admits he loves her. Once Lois enters the scene, Peter immediately splashes lemonade in Meg's face, resuming the status quo. But before the story ends, Peter turns around and winks at Meg, reiterating what he just said, ending the subplot. I actually kinda enjoyed this more than I expected I would. I love that it's pretty much Road to Colorado, only they're here for like 3 minutes, maybe. Peter and Meg's subplot is actually nice, though simple, and I always like when Peter and Meg get along. I'm glad Peter and Lois weren't the subplot again, to be fully honest. Brian and Stewie's ending is also gold, and may honestly be better ending than Road to Europe. Like the other two Road to episodes so far, this is one of Family Guy's best. Probably above Europe, but below Rhode Island. Let's move on to Road to Germany. Wow, again, it's not Road to the Multiverse. Season 7, Episode 3, Road to Germany, would premiere on October 19, 2008. Dan Povenmire is no longer directing the Road 2 series of episodes, starting with this one. He was quite busy with something else. This episode would now be directed by Greg Colton. Alright Greg, let's see what you got. Of course, this episode begins with the signature title cards, and I gotta say, this might be my favorite iteration so far. We enter the episode with the Griffin family and friends in the middle of an Oscars watch party. And I gotta say, that Steve Buscemi joke is crazy.
Man, look at that Steve Buscemi. Every one of his teeth is in business for itself.
That's right, Scarlett. But this year... Hey, where are you going?
I'm going to the Elton John party.
What the hell?
Out of pocket. Of those friends, Mort Goldman gets up from the party in a rush to the bathroom. When he arrives at the upstairs bathroom, Mort is greeted with a locked door. Meg and, Quagmire are on the other side. Mort then resorts to Stewie's bedroom where he finds Stewie's time machine. Thinking it was a porta potty, he enters into the machine and is suddenly sent back in time. And after the Oscars conclude and Mort has still not returned from the bathroom, Brian and Stewie go and investigate upstairs, entering into Stewie's room. Stewie realizes that the time machine was just used, and Brian is shocked to hear that Stewie has built the time machine. Wow, I just realized that the first episode Stewie references the time machine at all, explaining it all to Brian. Neat. Stewie and Brian grab a return pad and follow to rescue him. They arrive in Warsaw, Poland, and it takes a minute for them to find Mort, but they eventually do, finding him hiding in a synagogue in attendance for a wedding. Stewie and Brian join in and enjoy the wedding's festivities, but while celebrating, it's revealed that Germany is about to invade Poland. It is September 1st, 1939, and Brian and Stewie didn't know that it was that date, realizing once the invasion interrupts the festivities. God damn. This setup is so random, I love it. Like in concept, this episode is crazy and Mort gets to be a part of one of the Road 2 adventures, like, who would have guessed? Honestly, an interesting concept though. So it's cool we actually get a fully fleshed out Stewie and Brian adventure without any cuts to a B plot. In our only plot, Brian, Stewie, and Mort attempt to return on the return pad, but it turns out it's broken. Of course. They have no other choice than escaping Warsaw in a badass sequence by both Brian and Stewie, escaping the Nazis by motorbike and hijacking a U-boat in the attempt to get to England. They are chased down by the Nazis but are ultimately able to shake them and arrive in a pretty destroyed England. Now that they're safe, Stewie checks the pad's problem, learning that they're out of uranium fuel necessary for it to work. Stewie explains that the only place that would have uranium close to them would be in the testing facilities in Nazi Germany. Goddamn. To get themselves there, the trio joins the Royal Air Force and quickly get into a dogfight with Luftwaffe, Germany's air force during the Nazi regime, but are suddenly joined by Hawkmen out of nowhere and help them defeat them. Yeah, you heard me right. Hawkmen. Man, I wish they were real. Imagine they were actually a part of our lore. Sorry, okay, I'm getting off track. The dogfight is honestly really hype, and though this episode feels quite different compared to the other Road 2 episodes, it is really fun and unique in a lot of ways, mainly positive. It definitely stands out. Once the trio escapes the dogfight, they parachute into Berlin, where Stewie impersonates Hitler himself to steal the uranium, only to run into the real Hitler, in a pretty comedic sequence. Hitler demands their execution, and they narrowly escape. Goddamn, this shit keeps escalating every second. And I'll tell ya, I was waiting for a musical number this entire time, and it seemed we were about to get one at the end, but got blue-balled. Thanks, Mort. Good meta joke, though. It doesn't make up for no musical, but Drakey no likey. The trio will return in Stewie's room 30 seconds before Mort would initially enter the time machine, and to prevent a time loop, Stewie kills the duplicate Mort by forcing him into the machine and blowing it up. The original and clueless Mort then bursts into the room with no time machine left, and he soils himself on the spot, which ends the episode. I do want to point out that this implies there are duplicates of Brian and Stewie now. What are they gonna do to handle that? Okay, sorry, I think I'm taking things too seriously again. Overall, the Road to Germany is sick. Way bigger in terms of stakes and overall plot in comparison to the other Road 2 episodes. I'll be honest though, it doesn't really feel like a Road 2 episode, more of a Stewie Brian time travel episode that will eventually become pretty common. But this is the first time travel episode, so I guess it makes sense at the time for it to be a Road 2 episode. Frankly, this might be one of, if not the best time travel episodes from the series, and there's a lot of them. But as the Road 2 episode, it somewhat falls short. Family Guy even realizes this with the meta joke about no musical number at the very end, toying with us to the audience. Honestly, it's a great episode of Family Guy, and of course a classic, and probably one of the most thrilling time travel adventures Stewie and Brian have gone on. It's atop the list, it's just below Road to Rhode Island, mainly due to the lack of the Road to aura and musical number. Also, Mort, no subplot. Okay, I guess I shouldn't complain about that. Alright, finally, on to Road to the Multiverse. We're finally here. This might be the reason you're here. Season 8, Episode 1, Road to the Multiverse, would release on September 27, 2009. The episode was again directed by Greg Colton, and I'll say, this probably will end up being number 1 going in, but I guess we'll see. And it starts on a positive note with some very creative title cards, which take over Road to Germany as my favorite. The episode begins with the Griffin family attending Kohog's Clam Day Fair. The family all get into their own hijinks, and while they do, Stewie reveals to Brian that he won an animal contest with a pig. Brian questions the validity of his victory when it's revealed that Stewie has a seemingly roided up pig. A tank. I know this has been talked about before, but I love how it's implied that Brian has absolutely no view of the pig before he enters the shot, despite him being an absolute unit. Classic Family Guy. Stewie explains that he found the pig in an alternate universe and shows Brian a special remote he invented that allows him to travel between parallel worlds based upon the multiverse theory, which Brian acts like he understands, but he doesn't. And I really like this setup though. Stewie is really excited to show Brian his new device, and man, I love their dynamic. The duo then traveled to a world where Christianity never existed, meaning the Dark Ages never occurred. Thus, scientific progress wasn't delayed, and this world is honestly crazy. This may be the best use of Stewie and Brian's relationship so far compared to the other Road 2 episodes. Brian is extremely intrigued by this revelation, and he wants Stewie to explore more worlds, and Stewie obliges. And they start to travel through a series of bizarre multiverses, including a Flintstones parody world, a Disney-style world, which might be the most memorable moment for most people who have seen this episode, especially me. I mean, I'll be honest, this is how I found Family Guy in the first place, was this scene. I grew up as a Disney nerd, and I watched this clip on YouTube, thinking it was a fully legit thing, thinking it was Disney, and started watching Family Guy on Netflix, and the rest is history. Here we are, so... I feel like the musical number is good though, if not better than Road to Rhode Island. Both come across my brain at random times all the time, and the sequence is just beautifully animated. The references are hilarious, and the joke that they end on is even crazier, especially knowing that Disney now owns Family Guy. And thinking about it more, I may give the edge to A Wonderful Day for Pi over Road to Rhode Island, for those reasons I just stated previously. I mean, it's just so well done. All of the worlds are so unique and random, but are so in character for Family Guy's humor. I gotta say, I'm quite shocked Stewie had only gone to one other universe previously, but I guess it makes sense. They would continue going, even to a Robot Chicken universe breaking the fourth wall. Seth Green, Chris's voice actor and creator of Robot Chicken, catches a stray. The duo eventually land in a world where dogs rule over humans, and Brian, who likes this turn of events, begins to wrestle Stewie for the remote, but accidentally drops it, breaking it. Brian is forced to leash Stewie, to Stewie's dismay, stating,
"Take your stinking paws off me, you damn dirty dog!"
And man, he makes that sound so derogatory. The duo makes their way to the dog version of the Griffin house, and man, the Griffins are so cute as dogs. Brian is also human in this universe, and he looks cursed as This alternate version of Brian and Stewie have definitely done a lot of adventuring and multiversal travel, and it's somewhat insinuated that Puppy Stewie may be slightly more intelligent or older than human Stewie. Pup Stew explains to human Stew after helping fix the device that Stewie doesn't have control over where they go because the device is on shuffle. Stewie is dumbfounded he didn't realize this, and Pup Stew offers to help send them home. But before they have a chance, Dog Peter provokes human Stewie into biting him. Why does he do that, of all things? I mean, whatever. Anyway, this is a taboo action in this world. Joe immediately arresting Stewie, taking him to the pound to be put down. Brian, Human Brian, and Pup Stew go to the pound to break Stewie out. And they do, just in time, sending Stewie and Brian back to their universe. Human Brian, inspired by the potential life he could have in the human world, follows behind, leaving his life in the dog world behind. Only moments after doing so, he is hit by a car, ending... I'm sorry. Man, poor Human Brian. Excuse me. Only moments after doing so is hit by a car, ending his life. This is where the episode ends. In the end, this episode is so goated, and frankly, it could be argued as Family Guy's most iconic episode, let alone Road 2 episode. For it being a Road 2 episode, it's everything you'd want and more. An interesting plot, great animation and visuals, a memorable musical number, and of course, the great dynamic of Stewie and Brian really gets to shine here when placed in such a unique situation and environments. As much as I love Road to Rhode Island, I think this takes the cake. Alrighty, let's move on. Season 9, Episode 7, Road to the North Pole, would release on December 12, 2010. Greg Colton is directing once again, and I actually enjoy the other episodes that he's directed before this one so far. I had seen this one before, obviously, but definitely forgot a lot. I didn't even realize that this was the only Road 2 episode that is an hour-long special rather than the typical half-hour-long episode. I guess we'll have to see if it's worth it. Of course, we begin with the signature title cards, and I actually really love these ones. I also like the instrumental music in the background, which we'll hear again shortly. We open with Seth MacFarlane's real dad, Ron, sitting in front of a lit fireplace, Christmas decor, telling us about the tale of the road to North Pole. This is actually pretty hilarious and is reminiscent of other Christmas specials. And then we enter into the Griffin household with all members of the family, outside of Brian, in the Christmas spirit, preparing their individual Christmas wish lists. The family then breaks into a musical number singing All I Really Want for Christmas, listing all the things that they want. It's a good number and definitely comes across my mind quite consistently, but I honestly totally forgot that this number was in this episode. I mean, I don't know how, I should have put the pieces together, but whatever. I actually really like that this number is right away, immediately thrusting both the viewer and the Griffin family into the Christmas spirit, and the song bangs. And I really do like that it progresses into the whole town singing together, and they low-key all sound really good together. There's also a lot of fun callbacks too. And once the number ends, Brian reluctantly brings Stewie to the mall to beat Santa. They are greeted with a massive line. Brian sees Quagmire in line with the young kids, so he approaches them attempting to join them in line. And this interaction does not go well, as you could probably expect. I literally had to pause this episode due to the secondhand embarrassment for Brian interacting with Quagmire's niece, calling her a boy, not realizing she has cancer and struggling to get the courage to come out to the mall. This causes her to cry. Yikes, B-Rye. And I'll note, I actually paused this scene before it even began, so I guess it's pretty ingrained in my brain from when I saw this episode initially. Man, I miss old Brian. I mean, honestly, he had good intentions with his interaction with them, outside of trying to cut, and well, I guess his dying quote, but his aura has definitely been on a steady decline for quite a while now. Please go check out Ellis Mark's video on Brian if you want a deeper dive into his character. It's a really good video and it really shows what happened to this character over time, but again, it is family, guys, so anywho. Stewie and Brian ultimately end up at the back of the line, waiting for a while until they finally reach the front. And just as Stewie is about to sit on Santa's lap, Santa decides to go on break, leaving the baby in the dust. Of course, this pisses Stewie off. Stewie wants revenge against Santa, planning to pay him a visit in the North Pole, but Brian slows Stewie's roll, telling him he'd bring him there himself. Brian ultimately brings Stewie to a local Santa's village in Rhode Island without Stewie initially realizing. It doesn't take long for Stewie to see through this, bailing on Brian after telling him Santa isn't real, hitching a ride with a truck driver en route to Canada. And Brian immediately pursues Stewie in the truck, following him all the way to Canada. And shortly after they cross the border, Stewie accidentally shoots off a flare gun inside the truck, causing a major and fiery car accident, pretty much killing everyone involved except himself. Somehow, even Brian crashes his car, leaving both himself and Stewie stranded in the cold. Brian questions what happened. Stewie then blames Brian for all of this, and we also get a second SpongeBob reference in one of these Road 2 episodes.
SpongeBob? Is he not real, Brian? Is SpongeBob not there at the bottom of the ocean giving Squidward the business?
Suddenly, a truck driver pulling a snowmobile pulls over to the stranded pair and just offers them to borrow the mobile. Canadians. They also take the man's leg for some reason. Like, okay. Funny as shit though. They continue to drive the mobile through the snow until it eventually runs out of gas. And luckily for the pair, it's evidently not far from the North Pole, deciding to continue on foot. And after trekking for a while, they end up at an abandoned cabin to take shelter for the night. They continue on foot the next day and eventually reach the entry gate of the North Pole. And I love Brian's face during this reveal, Stewie rubbing it all on his face. They enter through the gate, expecting a magical place, only to be greeted with a grim, polluted factory. Shit, this is dark. They soon find Santa weak and dying, mutated versions of what are supposed to be elves due to being overworked because of excessive growing toy demands across the planet. The reindeer are also now vicious carnivores, sometimes eating themselves. Man, poor Santa. This leads to a depressing musical number that is led by Santa explaining the downfall of the North Pole, which definitely at one time was a happy and magical place. I was shocked. I totally forgot about this musical number as well, giving us 2 total in this episode. I mean, it makes sense for the runtime, and that it's a Christmas episode, I guess I can't forget that. And I hate to say it, but this does really seem like it would have been a realistic depiction of what a modern day North Pole would look like, especially of how greedy we all are today. Yes, I said we. A majority of Americans have a quality Christmas, including myself, and it would definitely be draining for Santa to handle anything like this in real life. If he was really real, it would be gnarly. In realistic fashion, Santa really can't handle it, suddenly collapsing. And the baby and dog agree Santa can't achieve the delivery of all his gifts that night, volunteering to do it themselves. And man, I totally forgot about this part of the plot, but now that I'm remembering, I'll let you know to brace for what's next. There will be depictions of violence. okay? Ready? At the very first house Stewie and Brian stop at, they attempt to deliver the gifts like Santa normally would. They fail miserably. They end up having to break into the house, which awakens the owners, leading to them assaulting the parents and tying up their child. Shit, man. I really did forget how messed up this episode honestly is. I mean, it's crazy how Brian and Stewie can escalate a situation to its extreme in almost no time. I was really beginning to feel the length of the episode at this point. I remember pausing during the scene and seeing how much time was left, and I think it's fine that this episode is longer than the others, but it does make me wish that the others were this long. I don't think it's really necessarily, but this episode has felt long in numerous regards. Okay, back on track. After tying the family up and spending a ton of time at the one house, they then realized they were at the wrong house the whole time. Damn guys, that kid is traumatized for life. Brian and Stewie realize they have pretty much ruined Christmas, delivering no presents to anyone, devastating everyone. The dog and baby realize their mistake and scramble to fix it. They suddenly arrive on live television, revealing to the world Santa's current condition. The duo beg anyone watching to limit themselves to asking for one gift a year so Santa and the North Pole can have a chance of recovery. The world agrees, and by the next Christmas, Santa is healthy again. The elves have reverted back, and the North Pole is overall back to normal. And I actually really like this ending. It's very wholesome, very Christmassy. I do wonder how the North Pole recovered so quickly. I mean, it's probably Christmas magic. I think I'm just taking things too seriously again. This is another episode with no subplot, and I really like that we get to go more in depth with Brian and Stewie's dynamic, especially in this lengthy episode. And I really like the ending. It's very wholesome. I'm somewhat overall on the fence about this episode though. I think it's honestly a great Christmas special for Family Guy, but it honestly feels more like a Stewie and Brian adventure more than a Road 2 episode. Though both musicals bang, and the runtime does make sense for the plot, it does make me wish they did this for the other Road 2 episodes, especially Multiverse. It is also way darker than the other Road 2 episodes, which makes sense with the plot and overall message it's trying to convey, but damn. Brian and Stewie probably ruined Christmas for this girl for the rest of her life. Also, how did all of the world know only to ask for one gift? I mean, they went on Channel 5 News only, airing in Rhode Island. Okay, I'm taking... Man, I gotta stop. It's a good episode, but by Road 2 and frankly my standards, which are unknown to be fully honest, it's probably near the bottom of the list. Alrighty, on to Vegas. Season 11, Episode 22, Roads? Honestly, I thought Disney initially got the title wrong, but yeah, it's actually called Roads to Vegas, which will eventually make sense. The episode would air on May 19th, 2013, and of course we're greeted by the signature title cards, and again, unsurprisingly, I really like these ones. I seem to have a tendency to like these. I mean, do you blame me? Overall, I love Vegas's aesthetic in general, and it's always been pleasing to me. Maybe it's nostalgia. Yeah, definitely. This episode is again directed by Greg Colton, and after last episode, I'm very curious how this will all go. Alright, let's get into it. The episode begins with the Griffins attending Cohog's Pride Parade, and I love the Peter joke. Brian then wins 2 tickets to Celine Dion in Las Vegas in a raffle. He invites Stewie to join him on the trip, and Stewie of course agrees. Before they leave for the airport, Stewie reveals that he has built a teleportation device and wants to test it by teleporting to Vegas. Brian agrees, thinking the idea is cool, and in a funny sequence, Brian does a little dancey dance thinking the machine was powered by dancing, Stewie saying so. It is not. Stewie gets a good laugh before starting the machine. They wait a moment, but don't go anywhere to Stewie's disappointment. The two agree to leave for the airport to travel by plane, but it's revealed to us that the machine did work and created duplicates of both Brian and Stewie instantly in the heart of Vegas. I actually think this is such a cool concept for an episode, and I like they're mixing up the Road 2's formula, more than they have before. And it's one of Family Guy's most unique stories in general. And I also think it's funny that Stewie's teleportation device literally says teleportation complete in big ass letters, and Stewie never cares to look at them at all. I mean, man, okay. Before I forget, I did want to note that this machine reminds me a lot of the machine in The Prestige. Please go check out that movie. I don't want to spoil it, but it's one of my favorite Christopher Nolan films. Anyway, the duo then check into the hotel easily, with Brian winning big at the slots in the hotel's lobby, which allows them to upgrade into a suite, spending copious amounts of money, and of course attending the Celine Dion concert. So far, so good. A nice trip to Vegas for sure. Probably better than most so far. I can't say the same for the other Stewie and Brian though. To put it bluntly, their stay in Vegas is ass. They practically have the exact opposite experience as their duplicates. They have to fly in a crowded plane, find out their room has already been checked into, the same slot machine other Brian won at earlier breaks when Brian tries. The duo then lose their money gambling, and to make it worse, can't even get into the Celine Dion concert. I have a random thought all of a sudden. Did no one question why Brian brought Stewie to Vegas? I mean, the whole fam saw him win the competition. Okay, I gotta stop. I really do like the storytelling in this episode, and it's really unique and adds to the Road 2 lore in a good way. It makes it stand out compared to the rest of the Road 2s. And with no money for a return flight, since somehow they let Stewie gamble his tickets away even though he's a baby, and Brian can't reach out to Lois because they decided to borrow money from a loan shark to bet on a basketball game, they lose that bet too, by the way. And at the same time as their lost bet, they actually happen to be sitting in the same place as their duplicates, accidentally switching backpacks. Each pair leaves without realizing anything occurred, and the loan shark ends up finding the lucky pair and killing Stewie when they can't repay him. The unlucky pair decide to end it to protect the family, and Stewie backs out. Brian does not. Damn. The next day, they're surviving one of each of the pairs bump into each other at the bus stop and put two and two together, realizing what had occurred. And I gotta say, the biggest flaw in this story for me is that unlucky Stewie didn't realize what happened earlier, but I don't know. I'm sorry. It's just Family Guy. It's just Family Guy. Alright. The last scene kills me every time. This is where the episode ends, and honestly I really enjoyed this episode, and it's frankly one of the most memorable episodes in the series for me. The premise is so unique, and like I previously stated, would love to look at how they wrote the script for this. This episode though lacks in typical Road 2 shenanigans like a musical number, in-depth character moments, but even though it lacks in those regards, it makes up for it by being a creative premise that was done in a fun and really unique way. Now, I see this more as a Brian and Stewie episode, which, if you're realizing, is becoming a pattern, and I will be putting it above Road to Rupert. Alrighty, we got one left. Our final Road 2 episode to date, Season 14, Episode 20, Road to India, would premiere on May 22nd, 2016. Again, it's been 9 years. Come back to me. Family Guy needs you again, Road 2. Alright, let's get into Road to India. Greg Colton is again directing, and come on Greg, this is the last one. Sorry, alright. Just like all the rest, this episode begins with the signature title cards, and I'll say, I like all the various Road 2 title cards, including this one, but it's definitely not my favorite. I'm not sure which one I like best though, honestly, and sorry, don't expect me to rank those. Alright, let's move forward. The episode begins with Brian on the telephone with Apple's tech support, where he begins speaking with a woman named Padma, an agent on the other line located in India. They begin to start a long-distance relationship despite Stewie's skepticism, and in the background, yes, in the background, there's a subplot again. Joe invites Peter to his bingo night while Bonnie's away. We'll get back to this, of course. In a sunroom jump scare, Brian talks with Padma, longing to be with her in person, and he decides to fly to India to be with her. Stewie wants to tag along, and I'm actually beginning to remember more of this episode more and more as it goes. The duo arrive in India in what is a very wholesome shot, and I mean, look at them. They exit the airport and are greeted with a stereotypical depiction of India. Good old Family Guy. What else would you expect? Brian and Stewie travel through different parts of India, making their way to Padma, meeting various obstacles. They also call out Wes Anderson's Darjeeling Unlimited as his worst movie, and I will not take that slander. It's a good-ass movie. I recommend for sure. Genuinely such a down-to-earth film that's quite emotional. Silly Family Guy. The duo arrive at the call center, and after a confusing interaction, are finally greeted with Padma. She welcomes the two warmly, showing them around the city, and takes them to a family party. Flippin' Stewie is dressed like Aladdin. I mean... At the party, Brian is stunned to learn that she's already engaged to someone else. But in an act of love, Padma publicly breaks off the engagement to be with Brian. This angers the shit out of her dad. And I mean, if your daughter breaks off an engagement for a dog, I guess I kinda get it. Classic Familia guy. Her father demands reimbursement for the cancelled wedding expenses. Desperate for money, Brian goes on a game show to win a boatload of money, needing to answer a question about India and its culture. If this somehow surprises you, Brian bombs this. He's such a weenie. I mean, out of all the possible answers, he chooses Jiminy Cricket when asked about who scored the most runs in ODI cricket competition. I mean, damn it, Brian. Literally any other answer seems like it would have been more possible. And it turns out, though Padma's father decided to marry her sister off instead, Brian gets really excited by this turn of events, but disillusioned by Brian's failure to know anything about her culture, she breaks up with him and wishes him well, leaving him with a kiss on the cheek. The story then ends with a Bollywood-style musical number featuring everyone. It's a fun number, but it's definitely not like the others of Road 2, but I guess it's pretty unique. Brian is also mauled by a tiger at the end, concluding the episode. Well, okay, we gotta backtrack. Time for the side plot. Like I previously stated, Joe invites Peter to bingo night while Bonnie is out of town. Peter is reluctant, but Lois makes him go. And Joe's introduction at the bingo night to Peter is the big cheese. And Peter initially hates this, going to his happy place. Thanks for the Tom Brady jump scare.
Oh, and you're wearing the necklace I gave you!
Joe convinces Peter to get more involved, and as it would happen, Peter wins, liking the thrill, and starts to become more involved, suddenly becoming popular among the rest of the bingo crew. He virtually takes Joe's place as the big cheese. This starts to go to Peter's head, beginning to overshadow Joe to an extreme level until he ultimately ends up abandoning him. Lois warns Peter about his treatment of Joe, and he obviously ignores it. This is the last straw for Lois, dragging Joe back into the hall, and when Peter refuses to back down, she unleashes Meg and Chris onto him. This annoys the shit out of Peter, surrendering almost immediately. Classic Peter. This allows Joe to once again be the big cheese. And frankly, I do remember the subplot before watching this episode, but I didn't realize it was attached to a Road 2 episode. It's pretty subpar, to be honest. I mean, bingo, it's definitely filler, and frankly, it's kinda needed. This episode's pretty boring and not that funny, unfortunately. But it's not as bad as I remember it being. But it's probably at the bottom of the list. And this is a disappointing conclusion to the Road 2 episode so far. I don't really have a lot to say. This is pretty much at the bottom of the list. It's time to wrap all this up. The Road 2 episodes of Family Guy are some of the most iconic of the entire series. Brian and Stewie's iconic pairing is due mainly in part to this miniseries. Some of Family Guy's most iconic moments, and episodes for that matter, are also within the Road 2 series of episodes. It pains me that there's only 8 Road 2 episodes, and we haven't gotten one in nearly a decade, but I could argue some episodes since then could be seen as Road 2 stories, and should have been conveyed as such, but alas, they weren't, which is honestly kind of frustrating. And I know I made some points throughout the video talking about how some of these episodes felt more like Brian and Stewie adventures that maybe weren't Road 2 episodes, and I still stand by that. I do feel like they kind of lost track on what Road 2 episodes really were kind of after the first few as the series progressed, and I think that, I don't know, I think that these episodes have a lot of potential, and I think the musical numbers could be really grand and fun, and the adventures could be limitless for them going around. But I also understand that, you know, Family Guy is kind of stale these days, and, you know, Brian and Stewie aren't as interesting as they used to be, I guess, dynamically, but I don't know. I still want to see it, and you know, I enjoy all of these episodes, and some of them more than I expected, so as I rank these episodes in different tiers in just a moment, just know I like them all, but yes, I do have a least favorite. So I will be ranking them from worst to best, starting in the F tier and working my way all the way up to the double S tier. In the F tier, at the very bottom, is Road to India. In the E tier is Road to the North Pole. In the D tier is Road to Europe. In the C tier is Road to Rupert. In the B tier is Road to Las Vegas. In the A tier is Road to Germany. In the S tier is Road to Rhode Island. And my favorite, and in my opinion the best Road 2 episode in double S tier, is Road to the Multiverse. And yeah, that wraps up my Family Guy Road 2 ranking in retrospective. If you made it this far into the video, I just want to say thank you. If you liked the video, any support, whether that's liking, subscribing, or commenting your own views on these episodes is greatly appreciated. As always, I'm Drakey Berg. Have a good night.